Good,
Yeah,
your shoulder
I'm
good?
good, I'm good, buddy.
Good, glad to hear it.
Yeah, hanging in there.
Is Dave going to sit somewhere?
Dave usually sits here.
Perfect. Oh, wow, yeah. Works for me.
Lou. When you talk.
Good evening, good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, how you?
Especially if they can't
How's
read
everybody? Hey, Dan?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Well.
Geez, you can squeeze by me easily now.
Will you have me?
Sure.
Oh, wait a minute, I gave you the wrong seat. That's Dan Stone's seat.
Well, now we go
Now we go
there.
there.
Now we get Jerry's seat.
I got an extra. I know you
Hi, everyone, wake up.
but it was easy. Oh.
Hey, John, we're just getting started with the meeting.
No.
All right, so you'll be here in a few
They
seconds.
were live concept.
Oh, God, have mercy.
You just
Yeah. I'm just trying to make sure we're up and running. Is he on? No, yeah, John is on. I was checking about you to make sure that YouTube is on.
Hey Grace, I'm in a meeting, I gotta call you back.
Was he? He said he left because. Amazing woman. I mean, I heard you say that, but I wasn't quite tracking.
One minute. Oh, that's fine.
We need to buy several clocks. All right, welcome to the September 6th Village Board meeting. If you could join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we're revisiting the public hearings that were left open for the peddlers and soliciting law and for the parades, public assembly, and the public use laws. Due to all of the comments that we received at the last meeting, and we have received multiple emails regarding it, we have decided that we're gonna withdraw both of the permits to be able to work with all of the comments and redraft them, and then hopefully re-propose them at a later date when we have been able to incorporate all of the comments into something that hopefully will be of value to both sides of things, and we will then reintroduce them. And we will also go through this process again where we will leave the public hearing open to allow for an extended amount of comments. So, so at this point,
Close.
yeah, so I guess we need to close.
The resolution is to close the public.
All right, so do we do them individually?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
You have to ask if there's public comment.
Well, we're withdrawing the,
You still have to ask if there's public comment. The OML is clear on this.
Okay. That's not from the advice of our attorney, so.
Your attorney's wrong. The OML, which I'm an expert, says you have to ask for public comment unless you close the public hearing first and then make the motion to withdraw. You now said you were gonna withdraw. It's not even worth it. You have to ask for public comment.
Okay, well, are there public comments that are new from the last time?
Can't
We
say
have
are there
everything.
public comments that are new.
Okay.
Let me just move us along.
You need to state your name and address?
Sure. Carol Compton, 5 Spruce Street. Just give me a minute, I'm trusting technology here. Thank you for your indulgence. Okay, here we go. In the spirit of cooperation between our village officials and the citizens of Pawling, I support the attached, detailed suggestions for the meeting. And this has already been sent to you, but it was yesterday, and so I don't presume that everybody's had time to catch up with their holiday mail. However, these do not address 3 following concerns that I have. I do not believe transparency regarding receiving a permit is achieved by whether a permit or not is granted, as was suggested by the village attorney. In my opinion, transparency is achieved if a request for a permit, discussion, and the decision are done during the public portion of a board meeting, and that the person or entity applying for the permit has an opportunity to be told when that will be discussed, so that they have the option of attending the meeting. And if there needs to be any clarification, instead of there being no permit allowed, that person can perhaps provide some clarification and the permit can go ahead. Or maybe they cannot provide enough information and that becomes made clear, and the fact that no permit can possibly be issued under what has the information that has been provided becomes clear. And that's the end of that. So that would be my definition of transparency. Number 2, I still question whether Chapter 59 is necessary at all. To wit, several years ago, there was a nationwide candlelight village throughout the country against the Afghanistan war. I looked for a place to attend, and there was nothing surrounding Pawling. So I and a few people in the remaining 4 days that were left to prepare made up a flyer, distributed it, and we invited people to gather by the American flags. No roads were obstructed, no sidewalks were obstructed. I was very surprised to see 120 people show up. We said the Pledge of Allegiance, we had a moment of silence for all those who were killed or harmed in the war. We sang patriotic songs, and we dispersed in quiet conversation. No problem, no law. It was a peaceful assembly. Number 3. At the last meeting, a Pawling citizen and taxpayer asked twice what the genesis of Chapter 59 was. He never received an answer. And I don't say the next part facetiously. I really just wonder if the fact that in the month of June, 3 gatherings were held in the gazebo area, one for Black Lives Matter, not because Black lives are more important than anybody else's life, but because they happen to be the ones that are being targeted now in our country. Secondly, there was a gathering to demonstrate people's concern about pro-choice in response to the Supreme Court decision. Thirdly, there was a gathering to support National Gun Awareness Weekend. Not pro-gun, not anti-gun, just gun awareness. I maintain that these gatherings would be less threatening or offensive, I don't know if that applies, to our village officials that is implied by having to enact Chapter 59. Thank you for listening. I ask that this be made part of the written public record, which I presume you have because it was emailed to all of you yesterday. Thank you.
Anybody else? State your name.
Tom Rose, Sunset Avenue. I just want to thank the board for its reconsideration of these 2 proposals and eagerly await your findings on the next round.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anybody else? State your name and address.
Yes, Larry Grunberger, 1 Birds Hill Road in the town of Pawling. I emphasize town because even though I don't reside in the village, the proposed law would affect me or anybody else who comes into the village for any purpose. And I come into the village a lot. I shop in the stores here. I go to the restaurants. My wife and I like to come here, but it makes it, this proposed law makes it feel less welcoming to us. And I also want to add my endorsement to the statements made previously by Tom Rose and by Steve Goldberg that were given to you. I think they make excellent proposals for improving this proposed law. But even with their excellent proposals, even if you were to adopt every single one of them, I still think that it's potentially troublesome, potentially harmful, because what it seems to do, I just focus on two just for the sake of brevity, and I do appreciate you're withdrawing it now, but I want to focus on 2 things that I think make it so potentially harmful. One is paragraph A in section 59.3, where it says, except as otherwise expressly provided herein, no person shall hold or engage in a parade or public assembly without procuring an assembly permit from the village. Now, that looks innocuous on its face, but the trouble with it is that when you take that together with all the other specific requirements, application deadlines, information that has to be provided, discretionary authority to reject or accept applications on various stated and not specifically stated grounds, what that amounts to is that the default position of the village on the issue of holding an assembly is that it's forbidden. And that turns the constitutional presumption of the right of assembly on its head. So that's essentially troublesome. And I would submit that you could, even if you are going to adopt this proposed law, you could at least cut out that paragraph A or substitute something else for it, because that presumption against the right of assembly is just, it feels wrong, it feels unconstitutional, even if no court has adjudicated that specific provision yet. The other thing, only one other point I want to comment on, and that's section 59.11, where it proposes some rather severe penalties that could be applied to minor technical errors in submitting applications, and it essentially burdens activities ancillary to the exercise of First Amendment rights with severe penalties. The penalties are grossly disproportionate to any possible harm that could come from a technical error in a permit application, or even in holding an assembly without a permit. It's like analogous to swatting a mosquito with a sledgehammer. So I'm grateful that you've withdrawn it and you're reconsidering, and I hope that whatever comes out from the deliberations will be much better than what we have here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Steve, you want to state your name and address?
Sure. Steve Goldberg of Shadow Lane. First, I'd like to clarify with you, is this the public hearing? I think at this point, this is the public hearing on chapter 59 versus 58A, if that's okay, right? Because, okay, I just wanted to make sure so we don't get lost. Thank you for keeping the public hearing open and providing the opportunity for continued input, which obviously I hold dear. And I have some comments, and to quote my good friend Dan Stone, I'll be brief. And I'll try.
And I never am.
I never, but that's okay. Look, what I want to tell you is this. Tonight, and this was why I was a stickler about the public hearing, we've heard concerns which may or may not be fair about the fair application of this law. We've also heard concerns about not the constitutionality, but the fundamental righteousness that makes restriction of public assembly a default position versus the encouragement of public assembly as a constitutional right. These are important things, and I would just urge you to consider that no matter how you recraft this bill, this proposed law, and chapter, those concerns will probably not go away. And so I'm going to urge you to take serious consideration to not entertain chapter 59, although there are no problems with chapter 58A. In addition to that, should you, in order to avoid, again, this kind of, communal regurgitation of this law, should you reintroduce the law, which again, I urge you not to do. I'd like to point out several of the important points in the memo that was sent by me and endorsed by members of the community. Firstly, the memo makes a variety of suggestions to increase the number of participants and reflect the larger community in which we live. It considers that we're part of a town of 8,000 with highly invested communities like Fishkill and Wingdale quite close by. I think this is important because you see the composition of the people here in the room are not just villagers, and this is a place where the village is part of the town. These are people who have an interest. Similarly, we have made suggestions regarding deadlines in order to work more realistically with the standing calendar of a small municipalist government, especially our government. There certainly are parts of the bill that are unworkable with regards to your standing schedule. Secondly, the memo addresses the consideration of exceptions, which they may have been well intended. They create a framework for rejection of advocacy booths groups rather, on both sides of the ideological and political spectrum. You heard one example from Carol tonight. What we have to understand is that many organizations, from Blue Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter, or from the American Pistol and Rifle Association, which promotes gun ownership, to the James Brady campaign, which promotes gun restrictions, could be excluded. And even if you leave this exception framework in the proposed law, we have suggested some alternatives that I urge you to pay attention to ensure that these groups are included. We've also suggested that the law provides a mechanism to tie rejection based on safety concerns to the elected and appointed officials in this county whose primary responsibility is ensuring that that very safety is in order to protect you from accusations, fair or unfair, of moral hazard. And again, this would extend to your participation in this process in general. This rule is a real opening for you to lose the public trust versus maintain the public trust. And I want to be clear that I do not think for a moment that was your intention. In a similar effort, we're suggesting a group of linguistic changes that the attorneys take seriously that removes the village government from making decisions without factual support. I urge you to take terms like exigent circumstances, which the attorneys in the room know can be interpreted in many different ways, to definitive language like declared state of emergency, which is unambiguous. And we've suggested avoiding concepts like conflicting adequate sanitary conditions and especially anticipated application. As any attorney will tell you, these are simply landmines. No matter where folks stand on an issue, it is the honeypot of litigation. Finally, we are humbly suggesting that you remove the terms and conditions which make counter-protests difficult, if not impossible. And I would like to remind you that democracy, when practiced, can be messy, that is for sure. But the alternative is unthinkable to the people who have been giving you feedback. And again, we urge you to publish this law if you choose to revise it early and consistently with the open meetings law. And if not, please consider removing and withdrawing this proposal permanently. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Marty Migan, 1 Aspen Court. I'm opposed to your new proposed law regarding regulation of public assembly, Chapter 59. In my opinion, it is not needed. It's a solution to a problem that does not exist. I encourage you to drop the proposed law altogether. There's no reason to limit free speech in Pawling by way of public assembly in such an extreme manner.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, so we have a resolution to withdraw the peddler's permit.
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to close, can I have a motion to close the public
So
hearing?
moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so you made a motion for the resolution to close the peddler's.
Yes.
Do I have a
Second.
second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We now need to do the same thing for the public assembly and public use permit.
Make a motion to withdraw that.
A second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing of the assembly and use permit?
Yes. So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so now, motion for the resolution to withdraw.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I have a motion to approve the August 1st minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. James, do you want to walk us through the resolution, the local law, to introduce the local law for the parking, please?
Of course, no problem. First of all, James McElhaney, Daniels Porco Authority. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Just briefly, the new law as introduced would primarily add a schedule of fines, assessments, and what late fees would be associated with various parking violations in the village of Pawling. Specifically in Schedule 7, there would be 21 different types of penalties. They are very more or less boilerplate and in common practice with municipalities around not just Dutchess County but New York State. And they would reflect quality of life and community, take into regard the community here. So you'll see certain violations that would reflect living near a train station. You'll see penalties for assessments regarding handicap parking violations, which takes into account the New York State Assembly and what they've set for fines and surcharges. So the law primarily outlines the penalties and a schedule that outlines the fines, surcharge, and then what the fine would be if someone is 30, 60, and then 90 days delinquent in paying. So that's basically the entirety of the resolution.
And you've been working with the company that we now have an agreement with, and the town has the agreement with to process all of this.
Exactly. This was in consultation with Dan Farrell of Fundamental Business Services, and it was worked on by David Daniels and with input from various members of the community. And as I said, it kind of updates Village of Pawling with a lot of other municipalities. So people, when they get a allegation of a parking violation, know exactly what the fine would be, and then what the fine would be if they are delinquent in paying or sending their not guilty plea back to the court.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions?
No, I think we've been over it pretty thoroughly.
Okay. I get
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All okay. So we're going to set the public hearing for September 19th for this local law. And we have a motion and a second, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, Dan, you're up.
I'll be brief. The board authorized the WIA grant application for the Lower Baxter project. Chazen and then Labella updated the engineer's report for that project this spring, and based on our best estimate of those maximum project costs today, we're recommending that you adopt a bond resolution not to exceed $2.334 million.
Supermajority. You don't have a supermajority, you can't take this motion up.
You need,
Excuse me?
You can't.
is that true? A bond resolution needs a supermajority?
Your counsel is Oric. The guy's name is Tom Meyer, ironically, and it is absolutely clear that you cannot take up this resolution without a supermajority. Not of the members present, but of the voting members. Line number 1.
Would you call Tom today?
Constitutional Law, Finance, Part 3-36.
Oh, good.
300-36.
Did you call Tom today?
I don't need to call Tom. It's in the attached.
You used his name, I presume.
No, I know who he is, and I'm just saying he wrote the primer on these bonds, and you can't take this money
excuse
away.
me?
Yeah, it's.
In the event that Steve's right, it is important that this bond resolution be passed before the 9th of September. I recommend that this majority set a special meeting for tomorrow when Mr. Bowager is back, and we can bring up this bond resolution so that it can be done before the 9th, because it is a critical part of the application. What do we have to do to set a special meeting?
Just schedule it, and I'll put it up on the website now.
The OML says you need 24 hours, you can't do it before.
Unless it's an emergency.
Even in an emergency, Governor Hochul's Executive Order 481, Chapter 481, Section 103.3 says that whenever practical, you need to post it within 24 hours. Even in the event of an emergency, this emergency can be postponed. Today is the 6th, you can do the meeting on the 8th.
You know what, why don't I reach Tom Hall?
Again, should we just schedule the,
Why don't we just
Special
let's
meeting?
make it every week. I'll call.
all right, should we skip over that for now? All right, Dan, you wanna move on to the next item of professional services?
Yes.
Agreement?
Also consistent with the grant application. Chazen was the entity that proposed to provide the work at Lower Baxter. Chazen was purchased by Labella. To get the contract consistent with EFC terms and conditions, we needed to provide you with a new contract document to review, and that's what this is asking, taking that old proposal,
Right,
making it a Labella proposal, and approving it consistent with the terms and conditions of EFC.
okay. So, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All right, Dan, you wanna move on with the next item of the paving costs for Corbin?
So we're asking tonight to approve an additional $2,500 for the paving of Corbin Road. We received a proposal 2 months ago, and at that time, on the state bid, it was explained to us that the costs were gonna fluctuate throughout the season due to the cost of a blacktop. So this $2,500 is the amount of the.
Still within our funding, so.
Right.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
Okay, so,
So I make a motion that we approve the $2,500.
I'll second that.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. John, you still there?
I'm here.
Okay, so you're up on the agenda to talk about the tree work that, basically we want to use some of the ARPA funding for this work, so if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Yes, we do have an issue with the trees on Memorial Avenue. There's a lot of aging oak trees, 2 of which are basically dead that need to be removed. And there are 20 other trees that we want to trim. Some of the older ones have limbs that are encroaching over Memorial Avenue or onto the Metro North parking lot. So they need to be trimmed. So we have a low bid proposal to have that work done by Woodland Tree Care for $6,000. They would propose to do the work over 2 Sundays, which would have the least disruption on any traffic on Memorial Avenue. So all of the trees, 2 trees would be totally removed, stumps ground to the ground, and then the additional 20 trees would all be trimmed up, and all the dead wood trimmed out of it, made to look healthy and brought into a much healthier state. So I would recommend that we would proceed with Woodland Tree Care, which came in with a low bid of $6,000.
Okay, so is that an emotion, John?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve Woodland for $6,000.
I'll second that. Any questions?
No?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we have a public assembly permit before us for the Resource Center, for their annual walkathon to be scheduled October 15th. Anybody have any questions? So, do I have a motion to approve this permit application?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Dan, do you have
Yes,
anything
so,
to report?
just a few things. The ROARS has successfully placed 3 pipes under the wetland, consistent with the permits and plans that have been approved. They need to finish work on both sides of the wetland to restore the site and install some valves, but their work is the bulk of their work is largely complete. DEC was out the end of last week and inspected the DEC was out at the end of last week and inspected the fencing and was very pleased with the work site and the protection the fencing afforded. We received 3 bids on Friday for the last contract that Umshai project will require. That's work at the wellhead, installing pumps permanently in both wells, what's known as a Baker-Peddler unit on both wells, and making the connection, the final connection of the high-density polyethylene pipe between those wells and the Baxter plant. 3 bids were received. Eventus in the amount of $542,100, Wellfield Installation in the amount of $493,450, and American Well Pump in the amount of $208,291. Labella is recommending that the board accept the bid from American to perform this work. That will not actually commence until after the 15th of October, but all the paperwork will be done in September, so the work can be prosecuted immediately after the middle of October. If someone would pass a resolution to award.
We accept the bid from American Pump.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And finally, Labella is meeting with Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health tomorrow to review the plans, 60% submittal plans for the Lower Baxter site. It's a process of getting verbal interaction between our designers and the regulators to make sure that the final submission is on target and consistent with what they want. And then finally, the WIA application, which we talked about briefly earlier, needs to be submitted on the 9th. We have a preliminary score from the State Health Department for the Lower Baxter project of about 90 points, which is an excellent score to qualify you for grants and loans. We will be making a recommendation later in the fall to redo the income survey, which, if successful, will qualify you for 0 interest for that loan. So we look forward to that, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dan.
Just to speak to Tom Myers, who's not available, he's out for the evening. However, looking at an opinion from the Department of State on Open Government, it says that although open meetings law does not make reference to special or emergency meetings, if, for example, there is a need to convene quickly, the notice requirements can generally be met by telephoning or faxing notice of the time and place of the meeting to the local news media and by posting notice in one or more designated locations. So I feel comfortable scheduling a meeting, and if we're wrong,
Okay.
Good.
we can go to the Attorney General and ask him for his opinion.
Okay. So today's the what, 6th?
6th.
Do you guys want to set it for tomorrow or
Yeah.
Thursday?
Sure. Or
Tomorrow? Okay. What, do we have to say what time?
Yeah.
It's John back.
John, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm available tomorrow.
During what time are you available, though, in the afternoon, or?
Any afternoon, probably any time after 12 o'clock, I should be available.
Okay.
will not be available in the afternoon until later, after 4.
After 4?
Mm-hmm.
So like a 4:30?
4 to the work.
4:30 work? All right, John, we're gonna do 4:30.
4:30 is fine.
Okay.
I'll be there.
All right, so we need a motion to set that special meeting.
I make a motion to set the special meeting for 4:30 tomorrow.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All right, so Do I have a motion to approve the August bills in the amount of $312,672.68?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And do I have a motion to accept the EFC pay request number 11 in the amount of $49,104.78?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And do I have a motion to approve the EFC pay request number 12 in the amount of $43,493.32?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so do I have a motion to close the meeting and go into public comment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any public comment? State your name and address.
Steve Goldberg, Oak Shadow. So, I am going to urge you not to conduct the meeting tomorrow, not for my benefit, because it doesn't matter to me, I believe this bond should pass, but for your benefit. And while I absolutely believe in Oric, they are not only my law firm personally, but have been my law firm in over $400 million of transactions, and I absolutely believe in Tom. Tom is not an expert on the open meetings law. So let me explain why I am A, pushing you for this, and B, why it's important. I am pushing you for this because you cannot claim that something is an emergency when it was included in the documentation, but the original bond resolution was dated August 15th. That's prima facie that the emergency was self-created. You will lose if people take you to court. I don't want you to lose, and I'm not taking you to court. The reason I'm telling you this is because it's already out there. You just had to move it to Thursday. You don't want to move it to Thursday probably because Dan has to stay over. Okay, that's why I was making such a big deal out of this. It's just procedural. Why am I saying these things in general? I'm saying these things to highlight something that has come to our attention, all of the people in this room, and some who have left, that we have been discussing for over a year and has peaked this week. The open meetings law is serious. You violate it endlessly. An example would be today, when you posted at 12 o'clock, you did not have the village meeting agenda. At 3 o'clock, you did have the village meeting agenda. That is not compliant with the open meetings law. This is a simple law. We have corresponded on this numerous times. Adherence to it is common practice in the town, in the surrounding municipalities. You are putting everyone at a disadvantage when you do not adhere to this law. And part of the law is properly noticing meetings, okay? There is an emergency exception. This is a self-created emergency. That is an easy argument to win. I am urging you to follow this law and follow it carefully. And as I know this seems facetious, but training is available. You can get trained on this. You can read about it. You can contact the Office of the Open Meetings Law and Open Government, and you can get expert on this. But until you get compliant with this law, which you're not, at every turn, and any of the four corners of the law, including going into executive session, which you have done 19 times in the last year, improperly. Okay, the law is clear, the opinions and case law attendant to the law are clear, they are available to any layperson, anywhere in this world on the internet. I'm urging you to follow the law so we don't have this kind of procedural nonsense, especially in a bond where the indebtedness is being approved. While I understand that you filed a negative declaration, you did not include that negative declaration in the minutes, and I know you are not obligated to have a public hearing for a bond, and I know that the public hearing does not count, and that a bond does not contribute to the overall indebtedness of the village if it's in service of water. I know all these things, but the other people don't know all these things. And you are laying minefields for yourself again and again. You passed on the opportunity to explain to people about seeker and the negative declaration. You passed on the opportunity to explain to people that this doesn't count with the indebtedness cliff, which is 7% of the total property value assessed in the village. You passed on the opportunity to take this up on August 15th when it was first
introduced to you by your consultants. And then you turn around, and if I hadn't have said supermajority, for all I know, you would have passed the law. Okay? Follow the rules. Follow the rules. You've all been such sticklers for the rules that you think that other people do or do not follow, to the point of wasting the village's money on some nonsensical investigation. Follow the rules. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, have a good night.